Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to Juliet English now, and you're going to talk to us about what exactly, Juliet?
Reframing family life around home education. But yeah, so my name is Juliet English. I am mum to 7 mostly adults now, and we've been home educating since 1998, which makes it 25 years. So there's very little about home education that I can't tell you about. And we've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and we're now wearing it inside out because the other side is so dirty. So we've yeah, I mean, home education is a wonderful choice. And one of the reasons why I decided to share on this particular topic, also in line with the whole truth bomb theme, is that, you know, when you start a home educate, your family life changes. And we were maybe a little bit less sort of intentional about how those changes happened. We did embrace home educating life and make changes as we went away, but there's some things I wish I could have done differently when my children were younger, because it would have possibly made life a little easier. So I'm going to share screen with my presentation, and my apologies if with all the busyness of conference, I haven't had as much time to prepare as I would have liked. So please bear with me. But this is a topic that I think we can easily chat around, and I may also ask you to participate at times. So the theme is, this is who we are now, reframing family life around home education. Okay, so I have used my own pictures, so some of them are not great. But when we start home educating, you know, often we start out all bright and shiny, brand new pencils, sharpened. And I do have to confess, I was one of those who went out and bought a lot of books. And we ordered like an entire curriculum before we even got started. We had, so my oldest daughter was about 7 or 8. And then the next one was around 5. And then my little boy was around 3 or 4. And we basically went and got the entire curriculum for my oldest daughter, and then the entire kindergarten and the entire preschool curriculum from a specific provider that we had chosen. And it was very exciting because it was very book oriented, very literature oriented. So it came in all these boxes, and we had the joy of unpacking all these books. But you know, these days I don't advise people to run out and do that right off the bat until you've kind of had a bit of time to think about it. But anyway, most of us, with all the best will in the world and with all that advice, we still want to start out thinking that this is how you need to do things. So I've just got another screen here. I've just got to make sure I get my pointer there. Okay. So some of us will make the decision we're going to start off with a curriculum. And we want to know what we're going to be doing every day. So we may create a school space and feel like we have to have a corner or something set up for school. And this is often the attitude local authorities will have as well, is that you're supposed to have a school space. And I don't totally disagree with that, I think, but I prefer to call it something like a child's working corner or their own little space where their project corner, because basically that changes the sort of the connotations around it. We might want to keep set hours. So we might think, okay, well, you know what, other kids would still be in school at this time, so I'd better still be doing something with the children for this time of the day. We become preoccupied with ticking boxes. So, you know, did I do this today? Oh, we missed this. Well, I'm going to get onto that in a minute. There's pressure to keep up. So with the curriculum we were using, there was a lot of pressure to keep up. Not from the curriculum at all, because they said, look, do it in your own time, whatever. But I had this little program, and I had all the list of things that were part of that curriculum, and I wanted to tick them all off so I could say I'd done it and feel good about the day. And then there's also pressure to catch up. So if something goes wrong, or you're having a baby, or you need to take a day off or something, then you feel like, oh, we missed out, we need to make that time up. And then what ends up happening is we become slaves to our chosen path. So instead of that path being there to help us, we end up trying to serve that path. And so, you know, this is a real problem that we can end up with if we're not careful. And that can actually ultimately result in burnout. And what happens is when you hit burnout, you start thinking, well, maybe the children would be better off in school. I can't do this. You know, and you just start beating yourself up. And that is like the last thing we want, isn't it? So my question is, but does it need to be that way? When you've chosen to home educate, you are choosing a different path. And as I said, a lot of us in the beginning think it has to be a certain way. It has to look like school. But we actually need to stop and say, what is the meaning? You know, let's think about this. What are the implications of this choice that we've made? And what are all the advantages of opting out of the system? So at this point, I would like you guys to open your mics if you can, or use the chat, and tell me, what are all the advantages of opting out of the system? And I know there are some, so if you all sit there quietly, I know you're lying to me. Yes, Hazel, choosing your own topics. We've got freedom to follow different interests, freedom to do things in the way that suits our children and us as a family. Being able to have a more active life, freedom of time. Yeah, there are loads, so yeah, I'm sure, just please keep coming up with them. More involvement in your community, absolutely. Following our own passions, being able to spend more time outside. Did I read that one already? Learning in all environments, not just in one classroom all the time. Being more active. Freedom from the prison of school, yes, Hazel, absolutely. Being able to rest and take time to recover when ill, yes. One big one for us was school holidays. We didn't have to do school holidays. We could go on holiday whenever we wanted. Yes, cheaper holidays, no itchy uniform. Oh, wow, yes. You can stay in your pajamas all day as well, being together as a family and siblings spending more time together. I loved that my older children got to see their little siblings grow up, were there for their first steps and their first words, and were so much more involved than they would have been if they'd been in school. Being in a safe place, yes. Honoring rest, not having to follow an external schedule. Yes, Helen said her two are much closer than they would have been. My personal experience is that when my oldest brother, I don't have a good, close relationship with, because by the time when I was little, he went to school, and by the time he finished primary school, I was going into primary school. And then by the time I went into high school, he'd already moved on. So we didn't really have a lot in common. There's so much flexibility, so much. And what I'm really wanting to talk about is that we need to stop so when you make that decision to home educate, I don't know where you guys are in your journey, how long you've been home educating, or you're just thinking about it. But if your children, particularly if your children are younger, this is a good time to actually stop and say, okay, you know, it's going great, but let's maybe be a little more intentional about how we shape our family around this thing called home education. And the advantages are still coming in here. Time on life skills, absolutely. Just so much. So what I'm going to be doing is just going through my thoughts on the subject, and there's a lot of overlap in some of the areas. So but it's trying to pull out what are all the things we want to consider for our family going forward. And I do want to also mention, This is a book by Clay and Sally Clarkson. It is a Christian book, Our 24 Family Ways, but it's actually quite a nice one if you do have the Christian faith, because it talks about all the things of who we are as a family, and that's a little bit what we're going to talk about now. So first of all, home education and having a home educator's lifestyle. What does it mean for different family members? So let's think a little bit. For a dad, how does it impact that dad? What does it mean for him? Anyone want to offer anything up? Do we have any dads in our audience here? Okay, so Helen says more time with children for us, and is it Amy, Ruan, that you enjoy the Clarkson's books and podcasts? They're very wholesome, very pro-family, aren't they? And yes, it is more time, because also you can think about fitting in more with dad's schedule as well. So you can adapt. You've got that adaptability. For many children who go to school in the mornings and they have to dash off, dad has to dash off. There's not a lot of time to spend together. What are the implications for mum? What does it mean for mum? And some might say, oh, well, it's a real burden on mum because she's now doesn't have a life. She's got to give herself 24/7 to her children. And I think there is a time in your life when that might be true, when they're all very, very dependent on you. But Meg says connection, time together, sharing their passions and interests. Amy, get to see all the milestones. And that's a big one. That is a big one, because you get to have time to mother and actually just pour into your children. And I love the relationship that you develop with your children, that you get to know them so much better. You get to see all their different facets and strengths and weaknesses. And then let's think of what it means for children. And yes, there's a lot of very obvious things that it means for children, but some of the things we mentioned earlier about having time, we can give our children the gift of time, where they don't have to finish off a project just because, oh, well, we're supposed to do this from 9 to 10, and then we're doing this from 10 till 11. You don't have that anymore. So you can give your children the gift of time. Yes, Helen says it's been a big change for her in terms of lifetime and thinking more intentionally about parenting. And yes, absolutely. And with children, I think one of the big reasons we have issues in this country around mental health with children is that they don't have time just to be alone or to play unstructured without somebody supervising. Just to learn to have to sit quietly and think, or to go and play in the garden and dig for bugs or whatever. They don't have that time. They don't have time for childhood. And Meg has said there again, feeling safe, that the children feel safe. There's a security that you can provide at home, and a consistency and a predictability that you can provide. Yes, and they get a chance to try things out. And you can also, we spoke about this in the previous session with Sarah Travers, they get to fail at things, and nobody makes them feel stupid for not getting a thing right, because they're not competing against anyone as well. So there's that, of course, they're not being compared and not competing. So let me think, I can't remember what my next slide is. Okay, so one of the things you can ask yourselves is, who are you as a family? So in reshaping and reframing our family life, this might be a good time to think, is who are we? And I'm going to go a little step further, and there is a time to rebrand yourselves. So perhaps before, you were the family where, you rushed off on the school run, and mum was maybe working, dad was working, and you had a specific kind of life that when people looked at your life, they saw that's who you are. But now you're different. Something's different. And it can be worthwhile to kind of rebrand yourselves, but intentionally, in a way that gives your children a sense of identity. So a bit like Sally Clarkson's 24 Family Ways, where they talk about, this is the way we are. We do what we know is right, regardless what others do or say. We choose to be patient, even when we feel like getting our own way. Those are little things that if that becomes part of your family culture and your children feel a sense of identity and they know where the boundaries are, but we're going to get to that shortly. So often companies will have something called a mission statement, but there's absolutely no reason why, as a family, you can't have your own mission statement. And what I want to just say about that is, please, this is not set in stone. What I'm saying is not like a law that you have to do it. It's just that this might be a helpful tool to think about. And I just want to say, Haifa said she thinks homemade changes a mother's mindset. It forces you to slow down, include your children, you learn with your children, and it empowers mums to march the beat of their own family's drum and not the world's. And Haifa, this is exactly what Learn Free is about this year. It's the power of home education to transform not only the children, but the parents. I am a transformed mum today because I home educated. And I think it's one of the hugely positive things that they don't talk about is how it can be the making of a family. It can be the making of parents, not just the children. So this is a personal mission statement. It defines your values, who you are, how you define success. And that's quite important to talk about, is like how you define success. So before we started home educating, success was like, your children finish school, they do well, and they go to university and they get a sort of professional career. Once we started home educating, that kind of shifted, where we realized, we want our children to be whole and happy people and to find something that they enjoy doing. That means that they say that if you do find something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life, where your work is your joy and your work is its own reward. It's not just about having this job and the humdrum. And so that for us, success became about helping our children find a path for them that worked for them and not our expectations. So a mission statement can be used to guide your decisions. Sorry, I've got to read the other screens on the other side here. It can help you stay focused to meet your long-term goals, create boundaries that make decision-making easier, and see whether your decisions align with your long-term goals. Sorry, I had to move my screen there so I could read it. So something to think about is, do you think as a family it might be worthwhile having a family mission statement? And that's not to say that it is the be all and end all. It needs some flexibility as well. So I'm going to just go through some of the things that would influence, I think it would be really, really helpful if you made notes for yourselves right now as we're talking of things, whatever sparks as I'm talking about these different aspects of what might guide your mission statement and shape that. You write down what it sparks for you. And like a mission statement is something that you should really do together with you as a family, to bring them all together, that you're all in agreement and the children buy into the idea. The last thing you want is a rigid set of rules that the child is going to rebel against the first chance they get. This is something you want to all buy into as a family. It's almost like, when, if you think of the Brady Bunch, those of you who are old enough, the Brady Bunch was a TV series, and they had like an identity. It was the Brady Bunch. It was this family with all these kids, and they all bought into the idea and had sort of shared values and shared goals, shared priorities, and that kind of thing. So the idea is that the whole family would actually think, actually this is a good thing to do. So as I said, there will be some overlap, so bear with me and we'll go through some of the ideas and just discuss them. Okay, so the first one that is your values. As a family, what is important to you? What is, and as there's going to be overlap. What are things that you really, really want to make sure your children grow up knowing and believing and ascribing to? So values, I think we all know what values are, but you have to think about it. And sometimes you marry somebody and you actually don't always share the same values. So this is a good time to chat about it and find some agreement on those values, and values that your children can also buy into. Then priorities is one that I do another talk about quite a lot when I talk about big picture thinking. And but priorities is very important, and I am going to recycle an analogy that I've used a lot, and you may have come across it before. It is not my original idea. It is out there on the internet, and that is the idea of the jar, the rocks, the stones, and the sand. And I don't know if you've come across it before, but this is the idea behind it. If you have a jar and you have some rocks and you have some pebbles and you have some sand, can you fit them all in the jar? And what's the best way to fit them in the jar? If you put the sand in first, will you fit the other things in the jar? If you put the pebbles in first, will you fit everything in the jar? The idea is that you would take your biggest items first, your biggest rocks, and you put them in first. Then you take your pebbles and you shake them in, and they will fit between the little gaps. And then you should be able to still throw your sand in and shake it between the gaps, and then you could probably even add water afterwards. So if you might have come across this, but what I use it for is to say, you need to decide what are the big rocks in your life, what are the non-negotiables, what are the things that you want to have happen regularly or on a daily basis for you as a family. And just here are some suggestions. So your biggest priorities might be your faith or your beliefs, relationship with family, relationship with others, and character. And character actually is like hugely important. Character is something that guides you through life, isn't it? So it's not something you want to put at the bottom of your list. Pebbles would be things that matter, like life skills and literacy, numeracy, having a good work ethic, developing gifts and talents, and caring and serving. They're very important, but maybe the character overall is more of an overriding priority than some of these more specific ones. And then your sand is your remaining filler things, your sundry academics, busy work, watching TV, console games. And we all know how we can lose an entire day through binge watching things. So you can see how if you were binge watching some series or watching loads of movies, you would possibly neglect your rocks, your great big priorities. And so as a family, and specifically I would say as mum and dad, you've got to think about what are our priorities, what are the really big non-negotiables that if we do nothing else all day, we know we've addressed these things in some way, that it's come through. So I do bring that up again at this point. Goals is another one, which, as I said, there's overlap. So goals, what do you want to achieve as a family? What would you like your children to achieve? And I say that very carefully because it's never a good idea for you to decide in advance what your child is going to be or become, because we know sort of famously that ultimately children will make their own way. And you can stand to, you stand the risk of them rebelling if you're too forceful in like, this is what I want for you. It's more about our goals as a family. Where would we like to get to as a family? And that could even be something like, we want to travel regularly. We want to do one overseas trip a year or visit, historic sites. And, what areas of life do you want to address in a very practical way? And you can set those goals. Then this one, which I also can't see now, strengths. Strengths. What do you have in your favor? What qualities and knowledge does mum or dad have? Do you have expertise in a certain area? Do you have contacts in certain fields that can help you? And what are the strengths of you as a family? So I think that if you've got great strengths as working with groups of people, you can use that strength as a family to draw people to you and create a lovely community around you. So that could be a strength. So when you're thinking about your mission statement, one of the things to take into account is what strengths do we have. Don't make your mission statement something that's going to set you up for failure because you are totally weak in a certain area. A mission statement is not magic. You need to base it on actual real skills and abilities that you are able to deliver. Resources, so what resources do you have at your disposal? Maybe it's lots of financial resources, maybe you're doing really well, and how do you bring that into how you want to carry out your mission statement? If your resources is people, or as I said, like contacts, that kind of thing, you know, that can also help you. So you're going to put these all get pulled into how you become more intentional. You know, for instance, I have a friend whose husband gets to do work all over Europe mostly. And what he does is that he uses that opportunity to take his family with him. And so his family get to visit those countries while he's doing his work. And so that might not strictly be a resource, but, you know, it's along those lines of this is, you know, he's using what he's got to help his children see the world. Relationships. What is our attitude towards relationships? Do we want part of our mission statement that we are all about granny and grandpa and aunties and uncles, or building relationships with those that live near us, or our community, as somebody mentioned earlier, is how can you make use of those relationships to help you achieve your goals and achieve your mission statement? And part of your mission statement could be that you want to be involved with the community, you know, you're community minded and you give back to your community, or you're caring for aging relatives. You know, that could all be part of who you want to be as a family. Routine. So at the moment I've got 3 R's, but it's going to end there. Routines. What is the reality of your everyday life? So does dad have to go off to work at a certain time and he only gets back at a certain time? That would be a routine. And how do you then reshape your routines around that so that it works better? So if you know dad is leaving for work at 8 every morning, but you really, one of your values is you want to do a lot of family time over the dinner table, you want to have good conversations, and you decide you're going to do this at breakfast, then you know that one of your routines is going to have to be that you're going to have to have breakfast at such and such a time to enable dad to have that time with his children before he goes off to work. So you look at what is the reality, what are those routines, and how can we look at what we want to achieve and build it around that routine and exploit the routine even in some cases. And I know of one family where the teenagers who had difficulty getting up in the morning, and dad worked, he had like a very long commute to work and only got back quite late at night. So they shifted the entire day so that dad and the teenagers had their time in the evening together and you know, enjoyed having dinner time together and everything. But in the mornings, dad went off and the kids weren't expected to get up early because they shifted their whole day to fit around that, so that they could still get what they wanted, but recognizing the constraints. And then the last one I mentioned is needs. This is obviously has to be taken in consideration, particularly with something like if you have a child with special needs. That has to be adapted around, and everything is going to be shaped around that as well. It has to be taken into consideration. And, you know, the thing is sometimes I'm a bit of an optimist, and for a large part of my life, I kind of bumped along circumstance to circumstance and responded to different things. But I wish I'd had more of a plan in place, because I think that would have served as a real guide when we hit difficulties. Because when we hit difficulties and I didn't know how to deal with them, it kind of caused me to go into a bit of a crisis. So I will come to that as well, actually, right at the end. So I think having some of that intentionality around how you structure your life, making the absolute most of home education, because you don't have to consider the things that other people have to consider. And I'm going to get into some more sort of real life examples now. So one of the things that, these are all my own pictures, by the way. So one of the things that is really good to focus on is childhood experiences. So as mum and dad, you might decide you want to really make sure your children have a wealth of different experiences and exposure to different activities, and testing themselves a little bit, pushing themselves, getting muddy and dirty, as you can see there with my little boy. And, you know, the thing is, one of the good things about home education is, look, we don't always know exactly what our kids' interests are. So by exposing them to lots of different things, we get a bit of an idea of who they are and what they like and what they're capable of. So, you know, I would think that's a very important part of home education, and that did come up in the chat. Is you know, we want our children to actually have a lovely, rich childhood experience, so that might form part of who you become as a family and your mission statement. Traditions and holidays. Sorry, what did I say here? Yeah, celebrating time together. So those are things that our family have been pretty good at. I love a good tradition. I love doing elaborate celebrations. And so Christmas, you know, we make a big fuss of it, and Easter we make a big fuss of, and birthdays, we like to go all out. And those things become part of your calendar. So you might then decide, as part of who you are as a family, we want to have certain things on our calendar that are really good special celebrations and mark the year as it passes by. And also, once again, this is memory making for children. So children are going to go back one day and they'll remember these wonderful times that they had as a child growing up. And it's steady, it's consistent, it's predictable, which is all very good for them. And you can involve them in the planning, you can involve them in the preparation. You know, I think life can be terribly boring, and people tend to do everything like you know, there's this rush, and then you have the event and then it's over, and then it's like, well, now what? So you can actually really embrace these celebrations. And we did, when my children were younger, we did a couple of sort of Advent activities, which were really fantastic because we would do them for most of December. So by the time Christmas came around, Christmas Day, yeah, we were really ready for it because we'd done all this gradual build up and really drawn out everything we could to enjoy it. And I think we can all look at our specific celebrations that we hold important, and how can we really involve them and just kind of get back some of that lovely celebration, and going to a lot of trouble, making special things, doing the table nicely, you know, buying pretty flowers and that kind of thing. So I think that is really, to me, that is one of the things we have been able to do quite well in our family, even though we didn't have a mission statement about it. This picture, it's kind of about involving children in our world. So if mum and dad, if one of you works or both of you works, is how can you involve children in that, so that they know, you know, it's not like you wave goodbye to dad and he's gone and they have no clue what dad does during the day. You know, how do you involve them so that they understand the world of work and other things out there? And this picture of my sons it was a project my husband was involved in, where they were building houses for people who couldn't afford, you know, it was affordable housing project. And in fact, ex-President Jimmy Carter of the United States, he actually was present at this project. But these are my two sons, you know, going with dad to go and have a look at the building site, and you can see they're obviously having a really good time and enjoying the experience, and probably playing in the sand as well, but getting an idea of what dad does. So just talking a little bit about intentionality, which has come up before. So you may decide, you may sort of see something in your child that they have a real interest in or real love for, and you may want to be very intentional about supporting them to pursue that. So, you know, something like horse riding, if a child is really passionate about that, or ballet for that matter, you know, or sport, you know, you could just really get yourself behind that child to support them and to cheer them on to progress and achieve. And this is exactly the kind of thing people don't normally talk about, but we did have a schoolroom once upon a time. Isn't it lovely? But it was more of like a workspace, and the children loved to go up there in the afternoons and go and play. And build things and whatever, because it was a lovely big space. But that was an intentional decision my husband and I made, is we wanted to create a space where the children could actually find everything they needed, and we could lay it out so that they, you know, they could have access to everything. I do have to say this was in South Africa. Buildings are somewhat more spacious there, but that was an intentional decision. And sometimes, you know, looking at your mission statement, there will be some intentional decisions that go along with that, that will, you'll say, you know what, this is who we are as a family, and this is what we want to, this is how we plan to evidence that in some way, a really constructive, practical way to evidence it. Okay, so going back to the relationships and resources, where we built in, so we've got a bit of a street party there, Jubilee street party in our area, or in our road last year. You know, you can make it one of your priorities that you want to build community with others. Our home education group have an annual family camp, and that's really good for building relationships and creating many, many happy memories. And of course, talking about resources, you know, if you're able to travel and take the children to places that will help them in their, you know, just to understand the world and to get excited about history, you know, that's something you can try and build in as part of this is who we are as a family. We try and expose our children to lots of different experiences. There's lots of overlap though, but yeah, family culture. So one of the aspects of our family culture is we like to camp. And so it becomes a big deal. And you can see we make a bit of a fuss of it. Look at our tent with its bunting and its fairy lights. You know, we celebrate that, and the family celebrate that. And we actually have the adult children coming along and joining us as well. So it becomes part of that culture. And just, you know, something that becomes a highlight of your year is that you all get to spend time together and go and relax in your favorite place. In our instance, that's Cornwall. So do love it there. So you can look at what is your family culture and what do you want to cultivate in your family. Here again, creating experiences and memories. So it's not just about experiences, but it's about the memories. And for me, particularly in the primary years, where you know, I'm not going to even go into the sort of secondary issues, but the primary years should really be about creating experiences and memories. Because I promise you, trying to put information into your children in a school type way, you'll often find they don't remember it, but they will remember things in the positive environment of relationship and fun and creating those happy memories together. This one is about sibling relationships. Sorry if the resolution isn't great at this scale, but you know, having your children being able to grow up together and know each other and still have relationship as adults, because I think that was the important thing. Which one was the Warwick Castle one you're asking about, Hazel? Oh yes, that was Warwick Castle, that image. Yeah. So this particular photo shoot, my daughter, the older daughter on the right hand side there, she was the one, she decided she wanted to do a photo shoot of the children, and she coordinated their wardrobes and organized the whole thing, and I took quite a few sort of autumnal photographs of them back in South Africa. And but you know, where else would you get kids doing that? You know, where you have that relationship when, and they're all kind of happy to work together on something like this. So that is something that you can be more intentional about, creating opportunity for the siblings to connect and become friends. And thanks for that, Helen. This is what we call our album cover. You know, the old LP records used to get, you had an album cover. This is our album cover photo. One of our children was missing from it because she had a little part-time job at the time, so she wasn't part of the photo shoot. But we got some brilliant photographs that day, and they're very evocative. So my last thought here is build in contingency plans and consider your worst case scenarios. Things will go wrong. This should not be like a rigid set in stone thing. It needs to be adaptable and flexible. In fact, you should build in how do we respond as a family? How do we respond when things go wrong? How do we respond if someone in the family, needs us or is in crisis? Because these things can happen. No family is perfect. We all have our issues. We all have our problems. In our case, I had one of my daughters, where she became pregnant unexpectedly, and that was quite a big adjustment for us as a family, because she was still young, she wasn't married, and the challenge for me was, how do I support my daughter to maintain relationship, because my priority was relationship, not to lose relationship with her. And so I worked really hard to make sure she knew that I loved her and I supported her and whatever she needed. And they actually lived with us for the first 3 years of my grandson's life. And he's we've got a very close bond with him today still because of that. And so think about what is your absolute worst thing that could go wrong in your family? And how are you going to face that? And that should be part of this mission plan, or this approach that you take to your lives. Like Sally Clarkson's 24 family ways. If you think about, what are our family ways? What are our family ways? How do we respond to different things? And you've got to think of all the possible situations that you might face, and how will you get through it? I do wish I'd had more of that sort of thinking in my mind when my kids were younger, because it can take you by surprise when things go wrong, because you can just assume that your children will continue being as sweet and nice as they are, and yet sometimes things can go badly wrong. So how are you going to deal with that? And do think about that, and what is going to be most important for you and guide you in your relationship with your child. And then just to thank you. So that is most of my my presentation there. I've had a quiet little question here from Amy about younger children. Look, obviously, this kind of thing is easy with younger children, because as a mum and dad, you can kind of make that decision, and children kind of grow into that with you because they have that understanding from early on. But as they get older, this sort of mission statement, it should be reviewed regularly. It shouldn't just, it can be an overriding thing, but I would say you should review it and evaluate it regularly and see if it's still working, and if things need to change. And then you should involve your children, and you should have that conversation, because it's kind of, I know a young married couple, and they always post on Facebook, like their hashtag is team and their surname. So like, in our case, we'd be Team English, and they identify themselves as a team. And what you want to encourage is for your children to consider you as a family, as a team or a tribe. And we do these things together, and we're not nasty to people. We're helpful, and we always reach out to those who are vulnerable. That they all understand that, and they see it being demonstrated by mum and dad. But as say, when they're younger, obviously it's you can't consult with them as much, and I don't know how much younger children really care, as long as they're fed and they can play and they're all well looked after. But as they are older, they do develop opinions. One thing about home education is you end up with some very opinionated individuals in your little democracy, and they can then weigh in. They can weigh in, and it might be difficult because sometimes they challenge you. And so you have to think about that as well. But, going forward with a bit of intentionality, and as I say, I wish it's something I could have done, but home education will transform your life. So it's, how do we kind of plan while still being flexible? How do you kind of have an idea of what direction you want to move in as a family? And really, actually, this is about getting the most out of it. The most out of it for you and the most out of it for the children. How can you go forward with that intentionality, and look at everything you are, everything you have, and how do we pull all of that in to support what we want to achieve? So I don't want to keep waffling on. If anyone's got any questions or wants to add any comments, this is very, very open. It's just my thoughts on a thing, and I hope maybe you found them helpful.
Thank you, Juliet. That's really helpful. Has anyone got any questions that they've got for Juliet? I know that one with the children came up while we were going through the slides, but if anyone's got any burning questions now, don't be shy.
Yeah, and then happy to have you turn your mics off or turn your cameras back on. Okay, Hazel said, I want to find my child again after deregistering him 3 months ago. Yes, this is a difficult age, really. And, the thing I hate about the way the local authorities do things is that, sometimes your children just need to heal. They just need to totally de-stress and get all of that out of them. And unfortunately, the way things are, you kind of have to provide an education from day one. So you've got to find a way of making things, doing things that are enjoyable, that that are fun, memorable, but that you could frame for a local authority in a way that they would see that as an educational thing. Because I believe all life is learning, and I don't believe that any experience is wasted. So it's just more about how you frame that if you're giving a report to a local authority, how do you make it sound acceptable to them? So I want to just sort of see. I wish you could. If I would say, if you're able to get away with just letting him have a lot of time to him, time to think, time to do the things he enjoys doing. Some people don't have a problem with letting their children go on devices and so on all the time, but I know that's, for many, that's not ideal. And sometimes I think it can be a way of avoiding dealing with stuff, so Hazel, you kind of need to find out what he's interested in, and he might not even know what he's interested in anymore at this point. So one of my favorite tips for when you don't know what to do is just go and do things. Get out the house, go and do things. Go to the aquarium, go to the park, go for walks, go on holiday, go and do things, and just have fun. Because there will be time for the learning later on. But that's why I hate the way the local authorities do things, is because you don't always have that luxury of being able to kind of just totally take the foot off the pedal with regards to academic stuff. There is some merit if your child is amenable to having a conversation with them and letting them know that the local authority will be breathing down your neck and wanting him back in school if you can't show something. But what I used to do with my kids is that I had them do a bit of maths and English every day, but it was never onerous. It was never more than an hour of a day. So the kids knew that's all I have to do, and actually my time is my own. And that was sort of, that kind of ticks a box, so you can always at least say they're doing that, so, but you would need to kind of buy his cooperation in that. So you would want him to understand why, and let him know that it's not, you're not going to burden him, that it will be all very doable, and you can even take it down a level or two so that he's more successful. If he's been battling in the area, you can go, to just go down a grade or two, so that he gets that sensation, that feeling of being successful. I just want to move on to Helen. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, academically he's okay. It's just it's almost like it's his life. School's taken lots of it, and he then sort of doesn't then want to do anything that's kind of really academic. I mean, he is doing things.
Yes. 3 months is very early days. 3 months is very early days. In my experience of all the families that I've worked with, it can take a year to 18 months to start seeing them really start coming into their own again.
The average statistic used is that for every year of the school that they've been in, you need 1 month of deschooling. And complete 100% deschooling. They need to learn not to have somebody else tell them what to do.
Yeah, I would say that's more a rule.
They get used to that.
It's more a rule of thumb than a statistic. But unfortunately, in this country, we can't get away with that if you're known to the local authority. So unless you've got a very good local authority where they're supportive and they understand that the child is healing and has been sort of traumatized, you kind of have to still just find some way to tick the boxes. But my way to tick the boxes was that little bit in the morning. And I'd say to them, if you're on a bicycle and your bicycle route had a hill, and then flat? Would you like to do the hill first and then the flat, or the flat and then the hill? And I'd say, and then they generally would say, well, it's better to get the hill behind you. And that's how I would put it to the kids, is like, let's get the hill behind us, and then you can carry on. I'm going to move on though, because we've got a few more questions and we don't have a lot of time. So Hazel, we are around on the app and on the Learn Free community group. Feel free to post on there as well and ask for advice as well. Helen, any tips for initial adjustment? Yeah, I think it would be good to have a conversation about like what's your long-term plan, what you're hoping to guide, to aim for, and how, and find what works for him, and you know, sort of work around his schedule and what he can do. If you email me, you'll contact me like through there's various ways of getting a hold of me, but if you get I've got my email is juliet@learnfree.org.uk, so the website domain, and Juliet at you can email me and I can send you a video from last year's conference, which was some dads and the dads' perspectives on home education. That might be helpful, and it might be good for him to watch that and just kind of hear from the other dads. Okay, so you've mentioned about Naomi Fisher. Naomi Fisher's excellent. Sandrine, yes, you can. I think you can frame practically anything in education terms, because honestly, I do believe that all life is learning. Even if you take 3 months off because you had a baby, the heck of a lot of learning that'll happen in that time. And reading, if a child enjoys reading, just get them reading. Conversations around the dinner table can always go into all sorts of areas, like you know, the Suez Canal and how that was built, or how pearls are formed. We've had that before. I've had a laptop at the breakfast table watching YouTube videos on pearls being formed just from a conversation like that. Yes, which is exactly what Sam, exactly what I've just said, conversation schooling. And I do like that. It's the first time I've actually heard somebody call it that. So I think that's a really good term, conversation schooling and car schooling, isn't it? So having the conversations in the car. You can also, you know, if they're interested in things like experiments, science books and that kind of thing, or you can do things just to try them out, just have a go. Okay, I'm having a look, just reading everyone's comments. You still, yeah, Sandrine says they're still deschooling 3 years later. So go and read Sandrine's comments. She's got some good common sense there. I think the men, as they get older, I like to try and sort of 12 might still be a bit young, but around 13, you try and make them aware that they actually now are holding the steering wheel in their hands, and that their education is actually something they get to have a say over, and to involve them in deciding what they want their education to look like. That can be really worthwhile. Hazel, are you local?
I'm in Warwick, yes, so local.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'd be happy to chat sometime as well. If you know, once conference is over and everything, I'd be more than happy to. Are you coming to the in-person at all?
No, I don't plan to, no.
Okay.
No.
So just get in touch with me. We also have a website called Streams Education, and if you go to the exhibitors page on the conference website, you can go and find Streams, and you can actually contact us. We also do mentoring as well. Okay. So you know, I'd be happy to chat with you some more.
That's great. I have got the Dr. Naomi Fisher book, actually, but
yes,
I haven't started it yet.
You have to. I mean, I actually brought a whole lot of books, and our time is up. But like this, so this one, John Taylor Gatto, Dumbing Us Down, it just tells you how rubbish school actually is and why it's a good idea to get your kids out of there. John Holt, How Children Fail, and he wrote another one called How Children Learn, which is fantastic. Which one else has got you? This was Harriet Patterson, one of our speakers here at conference, How Children Learn at Home. These people will they'll reassure you that actually, you know what, I'm going to quickly give you a quick little analogy. How when my kids were younger, we did a lot of history, and we acted things out, we dressed up, we cooked food, we did all of these things, And years later, I said to my daughter, oh, remember when we learned all about the Sumerians and how they did this, and we dressed up like them and we did this? And she was like, no. And I mean, she was my oldest child, so like she was older than the others, so she should have remembered. And then another time we were having a conversation about ancient Egypt and Cleopatra, and she said, oh, Cleopatra was Greek, wasn't she? And I thought, hang on a minute, I don't remember us ever discussing that or learning that. I said, well, where did you learn that? She said, oh, she read it in horrible histories. And so the thing is, there's lots of ways, but this thing that stuck wasn't the thing I did. It had to be her. It had to come from her. So, you know, if he likes to read, just make sure there's lots of good books around, because he will learn so much, especially through historic novels, that kind of thing. Just reading, or, you know, and then you can, if you read something, you can get the film of it and watch the film and whatever, you know.
Since coming out of school, he's reading more than he ever has done before.
Well, you know what? I've got a friend who says readers are leaders. So just reading to me is like one of the top ways you can ensure your child gets an education, and it doesn't have to be a textbook. In fact, it's better it's not a textbook. Living history, living books are best. So listen, I'm going to have to end this off, I think, now, because we're going over the time.
Thank you for today, Juliet.
Well,
lots of lovely comments saying it's made them think, and thank you very much.
Yes, well, thanks for joining me, and for all the questions and participation. It's really good to get that feedback from people. And, you know, a lot of this I come up with because I wish I'd done it. And I think things would have gone a little differently and better for us. So I'm hoping that out of my experience, I can pass something on to you that will help you in your journey. Okay, thank you, guys. So I think we can end that